All right. Today is Monday morning. It is about 9:30 a.m. on May 11th. And we're embarking on an exciting new story today. I know I often say this is my favorite screenplay I ever wrote. But this one is up there. If I really had to pick my top three that I get excited to read myself, or the ones that I was most proud of, it would be Elegant Eccentrics, Jailbreak, and this one today, which is called Marathon. This is episode 7 of the Madman's Daily Unequivocal Comedy, and it's a weird kind of fever dream satire. You could picture the trailer of this movie if it became a movie. You would just have a close-up of this guy running a marathon, smoking a cigarette with smoke all over him, all in his face as he's running a marathon. Because that's exactly the plot of this story. It could almost be like an hour-long Saturday Night Live sketch. This crazy, strong marathon runner who kind of sets all these new records, but he's also a chain smoker. I'm not going to try to explain more than that until I get into the story more. It's a bit longer than the other ones I've read. It's probably about 61 pages. Yeah. And so I'll have plenty of time to speak about some of the deeper themes and how it connects to my own life. This character, the main character's name is Joe, because I wanted it to be like the everyman American, that's the name you use, Joe. It's the everyman. It could be a black dude, it could be a white dude. It takes place in Atlantic City again. And I wanted to go back to Atlantic City after I wrote Man and Deer. Maybe initially I wasn't sure, but then I was like, I need to set this somewhere. Let me pick that again. Because Atlantic City does have that kind of grim atmosphere sometimes, almost like a shore town in the UK during winter time where it's all gray and rainy or snowy. And Atlantic City could have a cool type of appeal. Some of the inner city parts would be the primary location for a lot of these scenes, as Joe's kind of living in that lifestyle. He's a working class, very poor, lower class individual. And it doesn't speak to him, it's just that's his status in society. He lives in a very rundown part of the city, and Atlantic City did feature that. And it probably still does to some degree. But this is more in the 80s. This is leading up to the 1984 Olympic Marathon, which took place in Los Angeles, California in 1984. The Olympics were held in LA. When I was writing this story, I got really immersed in this. I was watching old YouTube videos of marathons, either that one or there was one that actually went through Atlantic City in whatever year it was. If you go on YouTube, I swear you can find anything on there. Watching videos of Dick Gregory helped me write the character of Kim in Elegant Eccentrics. Not to insult Dick Gregory, because I do love that dude. And I think he's really knowledgeable and funny. But some of his later videos on YouTube, he gets a little conspiratorial, which is fine. You have the right to believe what you want to believe. But I think he's lived a long enough life where, he was able to have a different perspective on things. So, yeah, I was saying, yeah, YouTube is such a great resource. And yeah, I'm aware. Yeah, Dick Gregory died in 2017, so almost 10 years ago now. But if you go on there, yeah, he's got so many interesting. Even if you listen to his early stuff, listen to his stuff from the '60s. He's talking radical stuff back then, which people don't think. If they heard it today, they wouldn't think he was radical. They just think he's speaking the truth. So it's interesting to if people would just know Dick Gregory. I didn't mean to speak about Dick Gregory this long, but if people just know of him from his later stuff where he got kind of conspiratorial, had some more off the cuff ranting like I do, maybe, it's kind of bad because you won't realize how pivotal he was in civil rights stuff and just almost as a philosopher, a modern day philosopher. So it's cool to go through these rabbit holes because everyone's just a human being. We have good and bad inside of us. I'm sure I say tons of stupid, illogical things, but I'm still talking because this is my goal right now. Whether I sound like an idiot too much or just my usual percentage of idiocracy, I'm still going to keep doing this and pushing because this is what I'm trying to accomplish right now in terms of getting these stories out there. The cool thing about this story, again, it's called Marathon. It takes place in the 1980s. I would say it's a somewhat dark comedy, but really just a comedy. There's no death or anything. It's not like that type of dark comedy. Maybe there's a bit of social commentary. Maybe there's a bit of just absurdism. I never really knew what the difference was between nihilism and absurdism, but I think they're connected, but absurdism's like, all right, so nothing matters and all that shit. Your life is meaningless. But instead of just being all nihilistic about it, and maybe that leads to, I don't know, anarchistic feelings or pessimism or just being lazy all day. I sit on my ass all goddamn day. Misanthropic anthropoid with nothing to say. As the Bad Religion song, do what you want. I think absurdism says, well, all right, so you've come to the conclusion that your life is meaningless. As an individual, you're not going to affect world peace or bring people together, change people's minds politically or whatever the fuck you're trying to do that you think is a good purpose in life. But absurdism says, all right, well, even if you come to that conclusion, don't turn to the dark side. At least try to do what you want to do. If you're still alive, you might as well push for the goals and for the things you want to accomplish before you actually die. So it's not as pessimistic. And this story is exactly that. It's absurdist. It's completely fever dream type of experience. And I carried this on into the next episode as well, which is way more out there. But I'll talk about that one when I get to it. I'm going to try to do about 30 pages at a time. So it's going to be a little bit longer than my other ones. The rates refrain, but I love this script. I can read it and be pretty happy with the flow of it. And the dialogue, it's a lot of voiceover, but I love voiceover. At times it works. You just need to have it in a story like this. My love of that probably goes back to Goodfellas with Ray Liotta's voiceover throughout that movie. I don't think it would have had the same effect without that. It's just the most memorable part of Goodfellas is the way Ray Liotta told that story. Henry Hill. I don't know how it would have looked without that. Because we're looking at it through his eyes. It's based on his book. And I don't know if you could have had the same type of connection to that character. Because he's so good in that. I can't think of any other voiceovers right now. But that's the one that I immediately thought of when I was writing this. I even had Ray Liotta's voice in my head as I was like doing these voiceovers and trying to think how would I approach this. Or it's tough for another actor. If another actor took this role, they would have to read my voiceover that was a little bit of my own personal slants on things. Yeah, there's a bit of myself in this character of Joe, but Joe could be really anybody. Really, he could be man or woman, but in this, he's a man. But yeah, it's tough to ask another actor to interpret how your voiceover sounds. Or how about wasn't Johnny Depp in Blow? Didn't he? I think he did some voiceover in that when he was playing that drug dealer guy. But there's so many movies with voiceover. I remember in college that maybe some of my teachers said don't use voiceover, and maybe other things I was reading about screenwriting said the same thing, or advised against using it as a storytelling device. You shouldn't really rely on it. But I've seen enough movies with it that, whether people like it or not, it's just how I'm going to write this story. It's how it came out naturally. Could things change? I usually say yes, things could change, but also I don't think this one would work if it was such a radical change and you got rid of the voiceover sections. I really don't think it would work. I just wanted to look that up real quick. Does the movie Blow? Because that's a really good movie that I forgot about with Johnny Depp and Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens. Does the movie Blow feature voiceover? Because I vaguely think Johnny Depp's got a pretty good voice for that. I think he does, like documentaries from time to time and other stuff. Johnny Depp's got one of those, yeah. Yeah, the 2001 movie, shit, that's from 25 years ago. That seems really crazy. The movie Blow features extensive voiceover by the main character, George Young, played by Johnny Depp. Yeah. I guess that, because it is similar to Goodfellas. I don't know if there was some connection. Maybe the director was kind of influenced by Goodfellas. I know it's a famous director who did Blow, but I forget his name. But I wanted to mention some of these so you could have an idea of the mood of this screenplay. And it's different than the other ones I've done so far. Who directed Blow? Yeah, Ted Demme. All right. I think he actually was on High Stakes Poker, and somebody mentioned that. Yeah, I remember that. I remember his face now. Ted Demme. Really good movie. Great writing, great acting. Oh yeah, even Penelope Cruz, I forgot about her. The guy who played his partner was really good. So many really good actors in that, actually. The guy who played Escobar and the guy who played Johnny Depp's partner who went like cocaine crazy. Yeah, great movie. But I don't know, maybe these crime dramas rely on voiceover. What else am I forgetting? I bet you like Casablanca has it too, right? I never saw that movie though. What famous movies feature voiceover? Let's see what else I'm forgetting about. Because even though I'm a big movie fan, I'm not as like that to that degree. Taxi Driver? See, I didn't even realize that. I've seen Taxi Driver like a handful of times. But, oh yeah, Big Lebowski. I should have remembered that one. The Dude. Shawshank Redemption. Goodfellas, like I mentioned. Sunset Boulevard. Vaguely remember that. Fight Club? I don't really recall. Yeah, I guess it did. Sunset Boulevard. Love that movie. We that was one movie we watched in high school, and I said it's like one of the best horror movies. It really is. It's another Twilight Zone episode. Casino too. All right, yeah. So Scorsese's not afraid of voiceover. Stand by Me, yeah. Moulin Rouge. Never really saw that one. But yeah, I don't know why people criticize it. Adaptation, The Royal Tenenbaums. Vaguely remember those movies. Fear and Loathing, yeah, okay. So Johnny Depp's like a really good voice actor, I guess, too. Just as a, I recall he did some music documentary, maybe. Usual Suspects, yeah, that's a really good one. See, I don't even recall in Taxi Driver. American Psycho, Big Lebowski, yeah, I should have remembered that one. Raising Arizona, yeah, also really, really well used. That first scene is like one of the longest intro scenes like that. Yeah, I can't praise that movie enough. Raising Arizona is like, the more I talk about it, I think it's like on my top five movies. I really like that movie. I never saw Double Indemnity, Citizen Kane, Rosebud. All right, let me stop and get to this story now. But just wanted to briefly mention that because, like, what's the reason? Is it just from the actor's point of view? They don't want to be reading a voiceover. They want to actually be acting. Why is voiceover frowned upon? Frowned upon in a screenplay. Maybe I'm forgetting something else. I think it's really from the actor's perspective. Actors don't want to be reading, they want to be acting. Why is voiceover frowned upon in a screenplay? Let's see what Google has in store for us. Voiceover is often frowned upon because it is frequently used as a crutch to tell the audience information rather than showing it visually, violating the core principle of cinema. Yeah, I see that in a way, but that's um, the mantra of screenplay: show, don't tell. And it could be kind of redundant as well. But yeah, sometimes you just need it. I'm just going to use that as a justification. Sometimes it just works. Sometimes it just works. I don't know. I can't really explain it more than that. But yeah, I do remember that. A lot of people maybe write their first few screenplays with voiceover because it's you want it to be in your voice, I guess. Johnny Depp voiceover. But this is really probably the only one I've really relied on it to this degree. There's not many other scripts where I've done this. Voiceover. All right. So Johnny Depp has done it. He's a notable voice acting career. Rango, I guess that's a cartoon. He was in, yeah, he did all those. Um, yeah, he did some animation. Corpse Bride, Sherlock Gnomes, SpongeBob. Yeah, he was even in Family Guy. That's pretty cool. I feel like he did like a music documentary on somebody. Voiceover for a documentary. This is gonna bug me if I don't look it up. Let's see what it says. Johnny Depp was for The Doors, When You're Strange, most famously the Grammy-winning Doors documentary, narrated by Johnny Depp. All right, maybe I did see that because he does have a. You instantly can pick out certain voices, like the guy from The Big Lebowski, or Johnny Depp, or even Ray Liotta had a Pretty unique voice. What was the guy's name from the Big Lebowski? You know, the cowboy guy who does all the voiceovers. Sam something, I believe, but I can't think of his last name. I know he's pretty famous. And Sam Elliott. Yeah, it sounds like a cowboy name. Sam Elliott. So I just wanted to prepare people for this different experience, put you in that mood, because those are the most popular movies that relied on stuff like that. I don't think it's a gimmick. I don't think it's really lazy writing. Maybe I can be convinced in certain cases, certain instances of screenwriting, if you want to call it a crutch, it's not showing the audience. But during those movies, you know, Ray Liotta's talking about his experiences as a kid working with De Niro's character, Jimmy, whatever his name was. And you're able to do both. You're still showing people images and how the story's going, but you just happen to have a narrator as well. Or Morgan Freeman, yeah, I gotta mention Morgan Freeman as well. The first screenplay I wrote in 2018 was called, what was it called now? I forget. But I was trying to do this weird Wizard of Oz type of experience, Elvis Presley Blues, which was another title I took from a Gillian Welch song. I wrote this really weird parallel timeline story that was really just confusing as hell. It's supposed to be this love story with multiple timelines, and I had a voiceover in that one, and I kept hearing Morgan Freeman in my head as I wrote this blues player from the South, and he's kind of telling the story. So yeah, I have to mention Morgan Freeman if you're, well, sadly he's doing like pharmaceutical commercials now. That kind of sucks when you hear a famous voice doing a pharmaceutical ad. All right, we're gonna get started. The one more thing, like Columbo, just one more thing. There's a pretty famous music component to this, Donald Byrd. Sorry, he had a album called a New Perspective. I think that was from the early '60s. Donald Byrd. This is the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'll start reading the actual story. Donald Byrd, Pretty Bird, A New Perspective from 1963 or 64. 1964 by jazz trumpeter Donald Byrd on the Blue Note label. Really good. Really, really good album. I'm not a huge jazz aficionado. I'm not knowledgeable like other jazz heads are. If you're a jazz head, a legitimate jazz head, you know, like all the drummers, all the bass players, you can name these people and who they collaborated with. I'm not anywhere close to that level, but I just like it sometimes to listen to. I'm not going to teach anyone the history of jazz right now, but yeah, Donald Byrd's pretty up there, pretty famous guy. Maybe he got some spiritual free jazz later. This is more of like a, I don't know. It was the most unique type of jazz experience I've ever had. So if I ever made my list of favorite jazz albums, this would be the top of the list. A New Perspective by Donald Byrd. I don't remember how I came across this, but it just instantly grabbed me. Just like Art Farmer kind of did previously. Yesterday's Thoughts. That album I found somewhere, like at a flea market, the CD of it, and it just really hit me. Art Farmer, Donald Byrd, of course, the Miles Davis stuff. Yeah, I can listen to spiritual Alice Coltrane stuff, John Coltrane. I got into jazz because of my hunting for vinyl. Just like how I got more into classical music, because you would find a good amount of classical, not so much jazz. Jazz is more desired, so you don't find a lot of great jazz albums at thrift stores and stuff like that. Maybe more at estate sales if you can find someone's collection. But I wanted to mention that because throughout this story, I used that album. That's all I was listening to as I wrote this script, as I edited it. Every time I listen to A New Perspective by Donald Byrd now, all I think about are the scenes in this movie, because I listened to this album like 100 fucking times over and over and over as I was writing this and editing it and picturing the scenes and going back and adding other. It was just nonstop. It's all I listened to for like, I don't know, a couple of weeks. I can still hear it pretty clearly in my head. And I just think it fits. A lot of these scenes in this story are marathon running, where Joe's running a marathon, and you need some kind of soundtrack as he's doing the voiceover. So you need some music in the background to give a better atmosphere. And I really thought, hopefully you can use this. It would kind of ruin my vision if you can't get the permission to use this album. You'd have to find something else or just compose your own stuff. But figured I'd give Donald Byrd some love because this album is up there for me. I had to buy it on vinyl, so it was one of those albums I could listen to over and over again, just like as a soundtrack to my life. All right, we're going to get started. See how quickly I can get through 30 pages. Oh yeah, the other thing, all right, I was lying. One last thing. I picture Seinfeld characters playing the mother in this. I picture Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I picture Jason Alexander playing Joe's coach. I don't know, it just makes me laugh when I picture those characters. I don't know if I should even say that, because now people will be picturing them as well. Maybe they want to picture somebody else. But that's my thinking. Every time I read through this, I get even more of a comic or a comedic experience because I picture Costanza and Elaine. And it's really odd, but I think it does work. All right, let's go. Page 1. We're going to fade in now over Los Angeles. This is the flash forward. Cristo Redentor by Donald Byrd is my song recommendation for this first scene. As bright sunlight shines down on droves of fans as they cheer on Olympic marathoners running by them, we drift from the back of the pack to one lone runner in the lead, far ahead of everyone else, at an absurdly quick pace. This runner even moves even faster, cigarette smoke rising from his mouth, as we meet Joe in his 20s, his face badly bruised, his lit cigarette dangling from his lip, running shorts, t-shirt, and a numbered runner's bib. He secures his pack of cigarettes rolled up inside his shirt sleeve and charges ahead, no other competitors in sight behind him, as on the screen there's a super that reads Los Angeles, 1984 Olympic Marathon. Joe is a machine, with a Clint Eastwood type of scowl, but in a more uncaring way, as his legs, badly bruised and scarred, move effortlessly, with his socks completely covered in blood. Fans on both sides cheer him on and wave mini American flags as he puffs on his cigarette. So from the very first scene, we begin this in the most absurd fashion. We meet Joe. He's running the Olympic marathon all fucked up. He's all bruised and battered, which we'll get into later in this story. And he's smoking a cigarette. Joe, voiceover. I know. Smoking is bad for your health and an overall disgusting habit. He runs even faster, like his body has a mind of its own. Joe, voiceover. Just call me an anomaly if it makes all you health nuts feel any better. He runs over to a female fan, puts out his cigarette in her cup of water, then sprints away. She smiles wide and lifts the cigarette out of her cup like she was just given a piece of royal jewelry, holding it up high for all to notice. Joe, voiceover. First unwritten rule of smoking: always be considerate of non-smokers. I'm just going to say VO when I do voiceover now. Most of this whole scene is pretty much a voiceover. He wipes sweat off his brow and runs past more cheering fans. Some of them are smoking cigarettes themselves. Joe, VO. This is a pretty fucking easy rule to follow. Just don't litter your butts everywhere, and try not to blow smoke into people's faces. Sound easy enough? He picks up the pace, remaining stoic as piss flows down his leg. Joe, VO. What? You should show the same level of determination at your workplace. Maybe get yourself a nice little raise. American flags are flapping in the distance ahead of him. Joe, VO. God bless the good old US of A. He blows a snot rocket out of his nose, then lights another cigarette while maintaining his pace. Joe, VO. I still do genuinely love both concepts. Alright, now we're moving on to a time cut later in the race, so maybe he's farther down, different location of this marathon throughout Los Angeles, however you can film this. Joe runs by more fans, no other runners in sight behind him as he puffs on his cigarette. Joe, VO. Especially God. I mean, it's amazing how long that guy has survived in the public mind meld. More fans cheer for him and wave mini American flags. Joe, VO. Might take on different forms and kindle different responses over time, sometimes a bit on the violent, fanatical side. But he's definitely still one crafty motherfucker. His socks are completely full of blood as he runs faster. Joe, VO. Would even still term myself a God-fearing man, though that traditional social construct tends to evolve as the years pass by. He's now blowing smoke rings that form into the 5 Olympic rings. Joe, VO. Keeps people blameless, I guess, like the whole mentality of how men would rather be slaves to a God who guarantees a beautiful harvest than free thinking and starving to death. Blood squirts out from his sneakers. Joe, VO. And can you really argue with that logic? Fans on both sides of the street chant his name as he runs by. Chanting fans. Smokin' Joe, Smokin' Joe, Smokin' Joe. Joe winces and grabs his aching ribs. Joe, VO. Sorry for all the theological rambling, but I'm approaching mile 20, and my thoughts usually get a little scattered at this point. Plus, I'm pretty sure none of you really give a shit about any of this anyway. Sweat drips down from his forehead as he runs like a well-oiled machine. Joe, VO. That's what people who don't run marathons will never comprehend. Won't make it half a mile if you can't stomach your own company, if you can't deal with your own bullshit, if you can't motivate your heart to pump more blood to your aching muscles. Stares up towards the clouds as he continues. Joe, VO. If you can't convince your feeble monkey brain that your body isn't really experiencing any of that pain in the first place. He sprints faster, staring straight ahead, like he was lost in a daze. Joe, VO. For about 2 hours, I can completely detach my spirit from my physical nature. While most sane people tend to listen when their legs tell them to fucking stop with the running already, I just let them do their job and shut off all further communication between mind and body. He puffs his cig and sprints even faster, his face covered in dried blood, cuts, and sweat. Joe VO. Marathons are a lot like life. You either want to survive and press forward, or stop and get stuck in the muck. If some larger force plays some role in any of this, so be it. But again, I'm pretty sure none of you really give a shit about any of this anyway. That's the end of this flash forward. I thought it was important to begin the movie like this. It's all leading up to this Olympic marathon in Los Angeles. Now we're going to get into the story of how we get to this point. So this is really the last scene of the movie, kind of. It's at least what everything's working towards is getting Joe to this Olympic event in 1984, which was real. It actually did occur in Los Angeles. So we're going back in time to Atlantic City, and it's a video store on the rundown part of the city, very seedy part of the city, as we're outside this Atlantic City video rental store. Maybe some porn video store / porn store. I'll just say it like that, I guess. Inside, or outside, I'm sorry, vagrants and prostitutes are hanging out on both sides of the street. Joe is smoking a cigarette under a large neon sign, Atlantic City Video. Behind him, a window displays some 1980s sci-fi VHS tapes and movie posters. Joe VO. My story begins here. Police sirens blare in the background. Joe VO. In America's playground. Inside the video store, customers are perusing through racks of VHS tapes, scanning titles from the early 1980s. In the tacky little room divided by genre, there's horror, sci-fi, romance, comedy, action, and Joe is nearby unloading a box of snacks onto one of the cashier shelves. So he works there. Joe VO. This has been my place of employment for the last 2 years. Now we're moving into the back room of this place, as customers are scanning the XXX porn section, skimming through porn magazines of every sort and other porn VHS titles, while a cross-dressing male, full beard, dressed in an evening gown, eyes Joe flirtatiously. Cross-dressing male. Hey there, cutie, got a smoke? Joe smiles, nods, and hands him a cig. Joe VO. Sure, it may seem like a fun enough place to work. Other customers peruse the sex toys on the shelves and play with whips, leather straps, dildos, teddy bears, and handcuffs. Now we're going to the back room, which is a stripper room. I would compare this to the scene in Boondock Saints, the really disgusting, seedy strip club with the women stripping in those little boxes. That's what this is. Almost like you put coins in the thing and the wall disappears and there's just a woman stripping for you. That's what we're looking at here. It's the early 1980s, so that was probably a part of every major city. The porn district. Instead of the red light district, it was just disgusting people masturbating to shit like that. That's what we're talking about here. Joe mops the floor by a row of glass individual stripper booths. Joe VO. But try working here for a week and let me know how much faith you have left in the human race. He mops nearby as 3 over-the-hill strippers are sitting on a bench scrunched together, and they're putting on lipstick, smoking cigarettes, adjusting their cleavage and their tight outfits. Joe VO. The real pervs don't show up until after 10 or so. A fat, greasy, balding man, Eric, in his 50s, pleasures himself, facing one of the strippers within the glass booth. Of course you're not going to show this, but you can tell by his face and his sweating that he's jerking off right now. Joe continues his voiceover. That's just Eric, the owner. He likes to perform quality control back here at least 3 times a week. A sad old stripper, Deborah, dances for Eric in the booth as he buttons up his pants and bangs gently on the glass. Eric, show a little more heart, Deborah. Seduction is a subtle art form. Come on now, hon. Deborah forces a smile, then gives him the finger when he turns his back. Eric, I know you still got it in you. Eric walks by Joe and pats him on the shoulder with his disgusting, sweaty palm. Eric, hey Joe, clean that booth up when you get a chance. Joe nods, leans the mop against the wall, and lights a cigarette. Alright, so we're getting used to this element. This is what Joe is dealing with every day. He's working in this disgusting place. Now we are moments later in the stripper room, and Joe, so it's just a time cut there. Joe is still mopping up the disgusting floor, like where Eric just was. Joe, voiceover. I really don't want to come off as a complainer here. A job is a job. He lights another cigarette. Joe, VO. Whether you're mopping up your boss's semen, or figuring out which chemicals will better addict your loyal customer base. Squeegees the stripper booth glass, as he's covering his nose with his shirt. Joe, VO. But seeing this type of filth and perversion on a nightly basis can leave a pretty hefty stain on your soul if you're not careful. Later that night, Joe is inside the main room of the video store, flipping through a movie magazine behind the cashier register. Behind the cashier register. As Pervert 1, a male in his 50s, trench coat, walks in and waves to him. Pervert 1, hey Joe, Deborah working tonight? He keeps his gaze on the magazine. Joe, yeah. Pervert 1, great, thanks. Pervert 1 walks towards the back room, just as Pervert 2, another male, obese, 40s, in a stained sweatsuit. Remember, this is the 80s, so you can get as creepy as you want with these characters. He walks in, and he's going through some of the VHS tapes in the horror section. Pervert 2, hey Joe. Joe doesn't respond to his greeting, eyes down on his magazine. Pervert 2, how's things? Joe continues to ignore him while he scans through some horror VHSs, and then the man tries to start up a conversation once again. Pervert 2, how's Gabby? Joe sighs, moves the magazine away, and finally acknowledges him. Joe, she broke up with me 6 months ago. Pervert 2, oh, sorry to hear that, man. She had some real nice milky tits, that one. Pervert 2 hands him the Twilight Zone movie on VHS. Pervert 2, this one any good? Joe, John Lithgow's good in his part. Pervert 2, okay then, save it for me, alright? I'm gonna go jerk it real fast. Be right back. Joe rolls his eyes as he walks towards the back room, as the Pervert 2 walks towards the back room. Joe, you know there's a back door to this place, right? Pervert 2, what? Don't like talking movies with me? You know, Joe, I don't quite appreciate your judgmental tone sometimes. He walks into the back room as Joe returns to his magazine. Joe, VO. I don't judge men like that, honestly. I really don't care. Everyone has to get off somehow, right? It's how we keep the lights on. Plus, it keeps people a little more at peace as they go about their daily travails. Back in the stripper room a little bit later, moments later, Pervert 1 and Pervert 2 are pleasuring themselves in their private booths as these strippers are dancing in front of them. Joe, VO. I just don't want to be picturing those two gargoyles expunging their rotting seed to washed up whores and high school dropouts. Deborah strips for pervert one behind the glass. Joe, VO. Like I said, it can leave a pretty hefty stain on your soul. A washed up stripper shakes her ass behind the glass for pervert two. So more world building here as we become a part of Joe's daily life. A little bit later that night, we are back in the main room of the video store as Eric walks in from the back room puffing on a cigar. Eric, Joe, I need you to reorganize the sci-fi section. Sci-fi horror, sci-fi fantasy, sci-fi alien type shit, sci-fi, just sci-fi. You'll figure it out. Joe pays him little attention as Eric walks back towards the back room. Eric, and I need it done tonight. Sci-fi is gonna be huge this year. Huge. Gabby, in her 20s, dressed like a prostitute, walks inside with Flip, 40s macho man dressed like a pimp. Both appear drunk and are high as they giggle and explore the comedy section. Gabby, ooh baby, let's get a romantic comedy. She grabs the VHS of Valley Girl. Gabby, can we get this one? Flip lightly pats her ass. Flip, whatever you want, sweet thing. They approach the register. Sorry. Gabby, oh hey Joe, forgot you still worked here. Flip kisses Gabby's neck. Flip, shit Gabby, this is the Joe you was with before? The one who killed the cop? Gabby hands Joe the Valley Girl VHS, then grabs some candy bars off the shelves. Gabby quietly to Flip, stop it, don't say it out loud. Flip eyes Joe intensely. Flip, so what it is, boy, you really kill a cop back in the day? Joe remains silent, completely emotionless, as Flip continues. Flip, better answer, boy. Don't be disrespecting, Flip. Flip don't take that shit from nobody. Gabby, stop it, baby. He's just a fucking loser. Flip grabs Joe by the neck, pulls out a switchblade and holds it under his chin. Flip, you used to fuck my girl, huh? Well, I don't think you can afford her now, sucker. He slams the back of the blade into Joe's nose as blood squirts everywhere. Joe covers his nose, still keeping his stoic demeanor, while Gabby jumps on Flip's back and tries to calm him down. Gabby, come on, baby. He's just a dumb punk loser. He's nothing to me. Flip punches Joe hard in the nose, while Joe just stands there, emotionless, his face a bloody mess. Joe, VO. Yeah, I know what some of you alpha macho types are thinking. If you were in my situation, you would have fought back, right? We now focus on a fancy silver pistol in Flip's pants. Joe, VO. Well, you would be wrong. I would much rather take a broken nose than a gunshot to the chest. Gabby holds Flip's arms down. Gabby yelling, just calm down, baby. Flip yelling, bitch, don't even try and tell Flip how to be acting in public. Eric runs out of the back room, pants down around his ankles, banging a hockey stick on the ground. Eric, what the fuck is all this commotion? They pause their arguing and turn towards Eric as Flip begins laughing in hysterics at the dirty, tighty whities around his ankles. I just thought it'd be funny here. Eric comes out. He was obviously just jerking off in the back room. He comes out in his underwear. Maybe it's like kiddie underwear, like Star Wars, or some weird, I don't know. You know how you used to have Scooby-Doo underwear as a kid? That's what I kind of picture. And Flip is just laughing towards him. Joe continues his voiceover. Besides, do you really think a lavish establishment like this provides health insurance to loyal employees like me? Gabby grabs the VHS along with some candy and junk food, and they both walk towards the front door. Gabby, giggling, "Bye, Joe, you fucking loser." Eric pulls up his pants and walks towards Joe as Gabby and Flip walk out. Eric, "Keep the drama out of my fucking store, kid. You got it? These perverts back here need peace while they get off. For fuck's sake. Go outside and clean yourself off. I'll watch the register." Joe grabs some napkins and walks out. Again, we're world building here. These are kind of absurd situations, but I'm sure similar things have happened. When I said this story is my like absurdist manifesto, it's the most absurd thing I probably created to try to mimic a real life experience of someone with real social commentary, but just I tried to make things kind of otherworldly in even in a scene like that. But also, I just want people to laugh at these images. All right. Now we're outside of the video store a little bit later down a side alley as Joe is lighting a cigarette. So again, he's a chain smoker. He's almost smoking like in every scene we see him in. Napkins stuck on his broken nose, and he's still completely drenched in blood all over his shirt and everything. Joe VO. Second unwritten rule of smoking. Always honor the sacred smoke break. He exhales smoke, shuts his eyes, and dreams of being somewhere else, anywhere else. Joe VO. Don't let anyone spoil those few minutes of toxic bliss. Lydia, in her 40s, junkie, dressed like a cheap prostitute, walks up to him. Lydia, got a smoke? Joe slowly opens his eyes, not too happy to see her, then hands her a cig, which she immediately lights. Lydia, thanks. They smoke together. Joe VO. Wait for it. Lydia spits out some phlegm. Lydia, you got any extra cash on you? Joe sighs and cleans off his nose. Joe VO. Never fails. She pats him on the shoulder. Lydia, I'm a little light right now. Slow out here in this economy. Just need to get a little bite. He reaches into his pocket and hands her $8. The edges of the cash stained with his blood. Joe VO. When my mother asks for money, it usually means she hasn't had a taste in a few hours. Lydia, that all you got? Fuck. What the hell they paying you here? He crouches down against the dumpster, trying to enjoy the last of his cigarette while she stands over him. Lydia, I need to stay at your place for a while. He digs his keys out of his pocket, takes his apartment key off the ring and hands it to her. Lydia, thanks. She takes the last drag of her cig and tosses it. Lydia, just for a little while. Joe, sure. She fixes her miniskirt and walks away. Lydia, hey, you should really get that nose looked at. I think it's broken. He watches her disappear into the shadows. Joe VO. My mother wasn't always a junkie whore, so don't be so quick to pass judgment. Moments later, right nearby where he just was, Joe, napkin still stuck to his bloodied nose, finishes his cigarette and gazes around towards run-down prostitutes patrolling the sidewalk. Rows of abandoned row homes graffitied with gang signs. A sad vagrant smoking crack against a nearby building. Joe VO. opportunities don't really appear too often in places like this. You either get out before this scum becomes a part of you, or you take whatever happens to slither in your direction. If you ever saw that HBO show, like, I forget what it was called, but they would kind of go undercover on the streets of cities like Atlantic City, and they would follow prostitutes around. It was definitely maybe real. It was reality television. In a way, it was a documentary. There were episodes in Atlantic City where whoever was making these shows would follow prostitutes and see how they survived. That's what I'm going for with that, the type of atmosphere, at least. I forget, it was like Taxi Cab Confessions or something like that. Yeah. All right. We're getting a look at Joe and his character. We're getting a look at his surroundings. We're building this atmosphere of this kind of surviving in these parts of the city with no opportunity. And you've already seen it with his mother. She's a junkie whore. You've seen it in his place of employment and his boss and the shit that he has to deal with. All right. Now we are looking at Lydia. She's down in a dark alley and she's hiding in the shadows. She pulls out a needle from her purse and finds a vein and shoots up. Joe, VO. You get the family you get. Now we're back inside the video store in the stripper room later that night. As Joe, the napkins are now jammed up his nostrils, so at least the bleeding stopped. He mops up the disgusting floor while an old creep snores in his booth, his pants down at his ankles. Joe, quietly to himself, fuck. He approaches the creep and pokes his side with the mop end. Joe, hey, store's closed. The creep snores louder while Joe pokes at his gut. The creep finally wakes up and walks towards the back door, gripping onto his pants, while Joe watches him exit, lights up a cigarette, then continues mopping. Outside the video store later that night, Joe locks up the front door, lights up another cigarette, and then turns his head as bam, a brick smacks him square in the jaw, knocking him out. 3 young muggers stand over him and kick his ribs and face. One mugger steals his jacket and digs through the pockets, while another grabs his keys and unlocks the front door of the store. These muggers now enter the store as Joe lays unconscious on the pavement, badly bloodied and beaten. Joe, VO. Another night in America's fucking playground. The next morning, we are in a free clinic in the lobby as poor families and homeless people sit in chairs in the rundown, overcrowded medical facility, waiting to be called. Joe wakes up on the floor, his face covered in cuts and bruises, like he just came out of a war zone. He walks to the female receptionist in her 40s and signs his name on the sheet on her clipboard, but she grabs his hand. Female receptionist. I already signed in for you, sir. He stares back confused. Female receptionist. You crawled in here in the middle of the night and passed out on the floor. Figured you would be okay until you woke up, as long as you weren't bleeding internally. Joe lights a cig and tries to adjust his bloodied nose back to its normal alignment. Female receptionist. Come on. Might as well go see the doc now. She leads him down a hallway. Now we're back in the private space of this clinic. Maybe it's like a bunch of bed sheets on clothespins, like that type of a place. That's very... there's a lack of funding in this establishment. as the doctor in his 60s, male in his 60s, inspects Joe's rib cage inside one of these little quartered off spaces. Despite the dark purple bruises on his body, Joe still appears to be in top athletic shape. Doctor, breathe in for me. Joe breathes in deeply. A more professional bandage on his broken nose now. Doctor, you might have a couple broken ribs there, but nothing major. You're lucky. Joe puts his shirt back on. Doctor, just take it easy for a few weeks. Your nose is likely permanently fucked though, but you will need a cosmetic surgeon to help you out with that. Joe nods and thanks. Doctor, I can't do much else for you, kid, but here, for the pain. He tosses Joe a small bottle of painkillers. Back in the lobby, moments later, Joe is walking by sick and miserable people who are seated and waiting to be called. Joe tosses his bottle of painkillers into a trash can where Manny, a homeless man in his 50s, sits by. Manny's going to come up in another episode of this. Manny watches Joe limp away, cradling a Scottish terrier named Curtis in his arms, and a shopping cart full of scrap metal parked nearby him. Manny gently rubs Curtis on the belly and kisses his forehead. Manny, just a little stomach ache, boy. They'll fix you right up. Don't you worry now. I wanted to include Manny there just in a short scene. I don't think he's in any other part of this script, but he's the main character in a later episode, Rinse and Repeat Part 2, Episode 10, where we return to Atlantic City again. Outside the free clinic now, as the building appears more like an old fish packing plant than a medical facility, especially under the gloomy, gray, wintry sky. Joe stretches his aching back and rubs his broken ribs, then reaches for his pack of cigarettes. He notices he has none left and walks over to a young female nurse who's on her smoke break. They make eye contact, like she instantly understands his facial expression. Joe, VO. Third unwritten rule of smoking. You bum when you need to, and you give what you can when you are summoned. The nurse lights another cigarette and hands it to Joe, as he nods in thanks, inhales, and walks away. Joe, VO. It's a give and take relationship, no matter if you're in your hometown or in some far off desert village in Mali. The smoker's code is globally recognized. He leans against the building and winces in pain as he blows smoke out from his nose bandage. Joe, VO. And if you have one of those friends or co-workers who take way more than they give, just let it be. We're all slowly killing ourselves anyway, so don't sweat those who take advantage of the code. They'll just kill themselves a little faster. There we go. Now, a little bit later that day, and remember, this is wintertime if I didn't say so. Now it's daytime, so we see it's all miserable and gray outside. It's probably freezing cold. And Joe's, just got his nose punched, and the night prior he got his ribs beaten and knocked out with a brick. Broken nose. He's all fucked up. But he's just a stoic dude, smoking his cigarette like it's just another day in the life. So we're at this city overpass as we're drifting away from the gray sky, and Joe is trying to jog through the inner city with his many injuries as he breathes heavily. Joe, VO. Sometimes the best medicine is to just let the pain sink in until it becomes a part of you. Embrace it. Make it your bitch. He pauses at an overpass, huffing and puffing, then vomits over the side as he massages his broken ribs. He wipes his mouth and adjusts his nose bandage as blood shoots out of his nostrils. Then he falls to his side, wheezing, Joe, VO. I didn't say it's always an effective strategy. A female moaning echoes from underneath the overpass as Joe gazes down to find Lydia hidden in the shadows like a troll, while she desperately searches for a vein to shoot her next dose. She sticks the needle in her arm and shoots in the heroin, then lights a cigarette as Joe walks towards her. Lydia, barely understandable. Hey Joe, what are you doing here? She passes out, while he lifts her over his shoulder, then grabs her cigarette from the pavement and pockets it. Joe, VO. Fourth unwritten rule of smoking. Never let a perfectly good smoke go to waste. Lydia drools all over herself like a drugged out zombie. Joe, VO. It'll be a welcome surprise later, when you're out of smokes and your body still craves that goddamn nicotine. We're going into a flashback to Joe's high school. From that scene, what are we on, page 18? This is way more fun to read for me than the horror scripts. Horror movies are more about the visuals, where you see Hilda and all these body parts around her, and when she becomes a witch later in life. And horror movies like that are more about the visuals. A movie like this, I could read, and it's more fun to read this script. It just is. I don't know if that's the reason, or I've just read this over and over again before when I first wrote it. It's a more fun script to get through. And I figured this was a good spot for a flashback to kind of dig into how Joe got to this point in his life. How did Joe become this miserable video rental clerk working at a porn haven for perverts? Yeah, you have to kind of dig deep into his backstory. Or I didn't really go that deep, but I wanted to give him a backstory. How did he get to this point in his life? Because sometimes you just get there because you don't have opportunities as a living in the inner city. Why do people become drug dealers or other things? There's a lack of opportunity. There's a lack of social climbing, or whatever you want to call it. It's just lack of resources. Some people just get fucked over in life. But in this case, I wanted to give Joe some kind of an arc, since I don't know, I felt like it was necessary for his character. So we're going back to his high school days. He's 17. He's in the locker room, and he's sliding off his track sneakers, or his track cleats and socks. He's wiping blood off his toes and rubbing his blistered feet, while Stan, in his 40s, dressed like a track coach. And this is probably, in the either late 70s or early 80s, so you can picture these outfits to that degree. Stan, all right, great job, everybody. This was the best day in school history. Stan walks over to Joe and pats him on the back energetically. Stan, and let's be honest, it's mostly thanks to this fucking freak of a runner. Not just a school record, but a new state record. Let's hear it for Joe. The track team cheers for Joe, who tries not to smile, embarrassed by all the attention. As Stan crouches down on his one knee and taps him on the shoulder. Stan, way to go, kid. This is exactly what you needed to get a scholarship. I'm talking full ride. Despite his bloody feet, Joe appears happy as can be. And I mentioned in the beginning, I pictured Jason Alexander playing this role. I don't know, I just pictured his voice or his face. And I pictured Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Lydia, Joe's mother. I don't know why. I've read through the script a million times, and I just keep picturing their faces as I read this. All right, so we had a little mini flashback scene to Joe's high school glory days. And now we're back in okay, yeah, we're continuing the flashback. I'm sorry. We're going now to Lydia's apartment. Joe, we're still on this flashback. So Joe is still in his track uniform, and he's got a tote bag over his shoulder, and he's walking towards the front entrance of this apartment complex, and it's still a seedy part of the city. Joe voiceover. They say home is where the heart is. Now we're inside the apartment. Joe walks in, dressed in his track uniform with his tote bag, as disgusting sex noises of a man and woman echo. Joe, VO. But I'm not sure if this counts. He walks by Lydia's bedroom, the door left wide open, as she's currently riding a fat old man, definitely faking it. Joe, VO. Whatever gets you through the night. He quickly averts his eyes and walks on by to his own bedroom. He slams the door, walks in, flips through his vinyl records, The Kinks, Lola versus Power Man and the Money Go Around, Part 1, John Lennon, Mind Games, and Rocky, the official soundtrack. He grabs the Rocky soundtrack and puts the record on, then does sit-ups against his bed, as Gonna Fly Now plays loudly from his stereo. Joe, VO. At least my mother took her career more seriously back then. Lydia pounds on the bedroom wall, echoing into Joe's room. Lydia off screen. Hey, keep it down in there. I'm working, damn it. Joe continues his sit-up routine as more disgusting moans and groans echo from the bedroom. So even back then, yeah, that's how they had to pay the bills. And all right, that's the end of this flashback. Page 20. I might have stole a little bit of this from Mad Men. John Hamm, Don Draper, whatever his real name was. Don Draper. It does sound like Donnie Darko, like some weird villain in a comic book or some shit. I think in that story, Don Draper, his mother was like a prostitute in a whorehouse. That's how he grew up. Maybe I kind of was stealing a little bit of that plot device, because I've seen Mad Men, that entire series, like at least 3 or 4 times all the way through. I was actually trying to watch it in Spanish, but I kind of gave up on that. Maybe I'll go back at some point. When I was trying to really get into Spanish land, I would try to listen to only Spanish music and watch only Spanish television or in subtitles, whatever. Mad Men's pretty funny if you watch it in Spanish. All right, we ended this flashback. We had some more mother-son relationship there, and we're back to the Atlantic City video store. Outside as Joe is lighting another cigarette near the front entrance. I know in movies today, it's probably like you have to warn people if people are smoking in the movie. Like it's different than it was even in the 90s with like Jay and Silent Bob or a movie like that. So this actor is going to be smoking in like every fucking scene. And it has to be like that because that's the theme. That's his journey. I don't know how you do it. Can you give him a fake cigarette that's not going to be like threatening to his health, or the other actors that have to smoke in this? I don't know how it works, man. I don't think you want to CGI every cigarette. That's kind of stupid. But I don't know. Maybe find an actor who actually does smoke. That would make it even more realistic. But yeah, again, these things could be talked out later. Joe's lighting the cigarette near the front entrance, and he's exhaling smoke through his still bandaged nose. Joe, VO. 5th unwritten rule of smoking. And this one is for all of you non-smokers out there. A conservative man and woman in their 20s, kind of like Jehovah's Witnesses or someone, missionaries. They're walking arm in arm towards the front entrance of the store, handing out pamphlets to random people, prostitutes, and vagrants. Then they pass Joe as he puffs his cigarette. Joe VO. Firstly, congratulations for never getting addicted to these fucking things. It might look cool and all, but trying to quit is about the worst form of torture the CIA could ever hope to think up. Joe exhales smoke, causing the conservative couple to cover their faces with their clothing as they walk inside the store. Joe VO. Secondly, as a smoker of about 2 packs a day, I do realize that I'm slowly killing myself with each and every glorious drag. Don't exactly know if it will be my lungs or heart or mouth or brain function. He exhales more smoke and walks towards a more isolated part of the street. Joe VO. But I'm well aware that all of this smoking is likely going to give me some kind of disgusting disease sooner or later. He stomps out the cigarette, then walks inside. Moments later, Joe is now working at the cash register, his pack of smokes on the counter next to him. As this conservative couple, the same one from outside, approach him with some VHS tapes, and he rings them up. Joe VO. So when you tell the smoker, the conservative woman hands him a Christian pamphlet, Jesus Saves, like the title on the cover, then holds up his pack of cigarettes. Conservative woman. Did you know that cigarettes can cause multiple forms of cancer and lead to even more harmful drugs? Joe feigns a smile. Joe VO. You really aren't telling us anything new. She pays him, and he hands her the bag, change, and receipt, while the conservative man stares into his eyes and grabs his arm. Conservative man. Jesus is the only drug you will ever need, son. They walk towards the front door proudly, while Joe lights another cigarette and blows smoke directly into the camera for a total smoke out. So it's like if you were watching this in the theater, all you would see right now is this haze of smoke as Joe continues his voiceover. I do sincerely apologize if I occasionally blow smoke in your direction or smell like a tar pit, but preaching to a smoker about the dangers of cigarettes is about as useless as me trying to convince those 2 born-again soldiers of Christ that Jesus doesn't love them and would rather them keep his name out of their pompous-ass mouths. That's a bit of a mouthful to get through, but I like the tone of that. As I was reading this scene again for the first time in a couple of years now, I'm like, would these conservative couple, maybe they're Jehovah's Witnesses or some kind of missionaries, born-again Christians, would they really be renting videos from this store? If you don't want to go that direction, they walked in and they were handing out pamphlets to people. And then they just approached Joe and hand him a pamphlet and same conversation. But I was thinking maybe if these Jehovah's Witnesses walked in, they're probably not from around that area. They're just trying to convert people. So they probably wouldn't have rented movies there. But either way, it's not a big deal. Maybe they do live around there. They want to show that they're open to supporting anybody, like showing some love for the business as well. But that was a mouthful to say. I do sincerely apologize if I occasionally blow smoke in your direction or smell like a tar pit, but preaching to a smoker about the dangers of cigarettes is about as useless as me trying to convince those 2 born-again soldiers of Christ that Jesus doesn't love them and would rather them keep his name out of their pompous-ass mouths. So yeah, voiceover is kind of hard sometimes to get the right tone out or the right pacing, really, the breath control element that I talked about before. A little bit later later that night, that was all daytime, so this is the night. As we're back in the stripper room, and Joe is sitting on a bench with Deborah, who is now in her non-stripper attire without any makeup, as she almost appears like a normal, mid-aged woman. They both light up cigarettes, then stare blankly towards the opposite filthy wall. Joe VO. Maybe smokers are a suicidal breed. She puts her arm around him. Joe VO. Maybe some of us are subconsciously calling out for someone to come save us. Rests her head on his shoulder, then she shuts her eyes. Joe VO. Maybe some of us just view life and death differently. He grabs a cigarette out of her hand and puts it out, then strikes a match, tosses it, strikes another match, then tosses it, then strikes another match. So, yeah, he's just dicking around, lighting these matches and tossing them on the floor. Maybe a little bit of a foreshadowing there. All right. We're going into another flashback. We're back at Lydia's apartment. As Joe, 17, he jogs towards the front entrance of the apartment, panting heavily, hoodie over his head, determined gaze in his eyes. Joe VO. I'll never forget the night I had my first cigarette. He stops to catch his breath as the shouting of Lydia and an angry man echoes from her apartment window above. Inside Lydia's apartment, Joe's walking in. As an angry, muscular man in his 30s, dressed in his underwear, aggressively chases after Lydia. She grabs a butcher knife from the kitchen and points it at him while he laughs in her face. Muscular man. What you gonna do with that, you dirty whore? I get my puss for free, you know that. Joe walks towards them as the muscular man laughs like a maniac. Muscular man. What, this here little pimp? He laughs like a madman and darts a mug at Joe, who ducks at the last second to avoid it. Muscular man. Come and collect from me? Now, the muscular man and Lydia are standing on opposite sides of the kitchen table, both planning their next move as they shift from side to side. Lydia, leave him alone. I'll fucking kill you if you lay a hand on him. He throws a plate at her like a frisbee, which smacks her right in the eye. And then frisbees another plate at her, then another and another, until Joe charges him, but is quickly put in a chokehold and tossed against the fridge. Lydia runs over and jumps on his back, but he slams her right through the kitchen table with very little effort. Joe charges back at him and kicks him in the knee, then tries to strangle his overly fat neck. But the man is too strong and chokes the life from him against the fridge. Lydia rises up and stabs him in the neck with the butcher knife, as he screams and places his hand against his neck wound, then collapses onto the living room floor, his blood pooling around him. Joe, still getting his breath back, crawls towards him, where he had previously undressed himself, and finds the muscular man's police shirt, police pants, and police hat. He and Lydia then stand over the corpse, as she drops the butcher knife and anxiously lights a cigarette. Lydia, shit. She passes the cigarette to Joe, who inhales, then coughs out smoke. So this is the story of Joe's first cigarette, watching his mother murder a policeman who was probably using her for free sex. Like, hey baby, I won't arrest you for prostitution, but you gotta bang me once a week, like a story like that. So that's a pretty major part of this story here. And I still picture Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I think she could handle a role like that really, really well. even in these scenes, like, she could pull it off, I think. So that's just what I picture in my head. All right, that's the end of this flashback. We're now going to go into Joe's apartment. It's in the kitchen, and it's daytime. Joe's smoking a cigarette at the table, nothing unusual there. And he's watching a marathon race on the small TV as Lydia walks in, dressed in the same clothes from when he carried her from under the overpass. So this is like the next day, or maybe 2 days, whatever. She's just been kind of recovering from that when he had to save her from the overpass. She sits down at the kitchen table, dazed and lifeless. Then she lights a cigarette from Joe's pack. They both sit in silence, barely acknowledging each other. Lydia: I only need to stay for a few more nights. Got a new place, but I can't move in until next week. Joe: it's fine. They share some more awkward silence, the only sounds coming from the race on the TV as the marathon runners approach the finish line. Lydia: I remember watching you run those stupid races. She laughs to herself and ashes her cigarette. Lydia: remember those days? He stares towards the TV in a daze and laughs. I don't know if I like that. I think he's just a stoic, staring at the TV, and he's just like no emotion or anything. Lydia: you thought you were Rocky or some shit. Or actually, I think that's a typo. It's supposed to be she stares at the TV and laughs. Lydia: you thought you were Rocky or some shit. She laughs again, then coughs badly, runs to the kitchen sink and spits up disgusting mucus, washes her face and pockets a few more of his cigarettes out of his pack. Lydia: I gotta go out for a while, get some groceries and shit. Joe doesn't pay her any mind as she walks out, his eyes fixed on the race on the TV as he puffs his cigarette. All right, now later in the nighttime, we're back in the stripper room, Joe smoking a cigarette. I think I did this intentionally. Every scene kind of opens with Joe smoking a cigarette, and he's sweeping up the disgusting floor while a slick-haired wretch, like just a very drunk and belligerent man in his 50s, and he's banging on the stripper booth glass as Deborah strips for him inside. He bangs harder on the glass, like she was a zoo animal. Slick-haired wretch. Come on, baby. Why don't you come over to this side and join me? He unbuckles his pants and slides them down. Slick-haired wretch. You know you want this sausage. Or you could say sausage. You know you want this sausage. He bangs his fist against the booth glass like an ape and breaks the glass as shards scatter everywhere. Deborah screams in fright while Joe runs over, grabs the man by his neck, and drags him out the back door. So even though Joe's a chain smoker, he's like a really well-built, athletic guy. The back entrance, Joe is opening the door and tossing this creepy man onto the pavement. The slick-haired wretch is now trying to get back to his feet, but he trips over his pants, which are still hanging around his ankles. Slick-haired wretch. Hey, I didn't even get to finish. Come on, come on. Joe kicks him away farther, then slams the door shut and locks it. All right, so inside, he's locking the door, and then he walks back to the broken glass. He grabs a broom and he starts cleaning up the mess, but then he hears Deborah crying and walks over to her. Deborah, as she's crying, I can't do this shit anymore. I can't do this shit. All right, later that night, Joe is lighting a cigarette, staring up at the store's neon sign. He flips through the Christian pamphlet that was given to him earlier and reads from a page. Joe, voiceover. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. That's a quote from Job 1:20-21. All right, moments later in a back alley, Joe continues smoking his cigarette as he's walking by other prostitutes who are keeping themselves warm around a bonfire in a metal trash can. Joe VO. Never quite got the appeal of organized religion. He spots Manny sleeping inside a cardboard box with blankets piled on top of him, Curtis cuddling on top of him as well. Joe VO. I don't think God ever really intended for us to organize his shit for him. Never quite got the appeal of organized religion. I don't think God ever really intended us to organize his shit for him. Either way, I don't think God ever really intended us to organize his shit for him. Whatever sounds better. All right. He tosses the Christian pamphlet down inside Manny's cardboard home, and he walks away. As we enter another flashback, we're in a courthouse and Joe's 17 as he's sitting at a bench while his lawyer, a male in his 50s, inches closer to him so nobody else can hear. Lawyer, you're 17. No priors. Everyone wants this thing to disappear. You do too, right? Joe nods. Lawyer, take this deal, no trial. I know it was self-defense, but you will still have to do some time. You're young enough to build yourself back up once you get out. The muscular man's widow in her 30s, the muscular man, the one that Lydia stabbed with the butcher knife, his widow is walking in now towards Joe as she carries her son, who's about 4 years old, in her arms as her daughter, who's about 6, walks by her side. Muscular man's widow. Is this the little punk? She spits right on Joe, then pummels his face with punches. Muscular man's widow. You gonna pay for their education now? Joe covers his face. Well, I'm not sure if he's handcuffed, so maybe he can't cover his face. He's trying to move away from her. I don't know if you want to handcuff him to the bench, but I don't know. If he's in for a trial or to plead guilty and take a deal, I don't know if he will be handcuffed at this point, as his lawyer's there with him. Because he is being charged with murder here, even if it's self-defense. All right, a few more officers run out, grab the woman, and lead her away as she's yelling, muscular man's widow, get your hands off of me, get your hands off of me. The officers release her, and she storms away with her children, while Joe watches them and wipes blood off his nose. So, yeah, he's got bad luck with his fucking nose, man. He's like Rod Brindamore. Rod Brindamore always seemed to have a broken nose like half his life. Poor dude. All right, weeks later now. We're still in this flashback, but we're weeks later at the police station as Lydia is crouching down in front of Joe, who is handcuffed to a bench, dressed in juvenile prison garbs. Lydia stuffs a few packs of cigarettes into Joe's pockets and pats him on the knee. Lydia, here. These are like currency in there. Joe nods. Yeah, she kisses him on the forehead, then rubs his hair. Lydia, thanks. An officer comes out, uncuffs Joe, and leads him away, while he looks back towards Lydia. Lydia, you'll be out in no time. She walks away in the other direction and lights a cigarette. So yeah, I get into this later, but yeah, Joe was forced to take the rap for his mother, even though she's the one that killed the guy, I guess. I actually explain this in the next few pages, but I'll just say it now. Yeah, like he's taking the rap for her because he's a juvenile. She probably would have gone and done hard time, even though the man was attacking her. She still killed a police officer. You're not going to get nothing for that, even if it was a corrupt police officer. Um, you're never going to get away with that without getting some kind of a murder charge. So that's what I'm going for. Joe's 17. He's a minor, and he'll get a lighter sentence. So he took the rap for his mother. And maybe I named her Lydia. Besides Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I kind of picture Lydia from Breaking Bad. That actress that played Lydia, I don't know her name. She could probably handle a role like this. I could see her in this type of a character study. I can kind of picture her face too. All right, moving on. We're on page 27. Yeah. We're ending that flashback. We're back to Joe outside the video store. He's locking up the store and he's lighting a cigarette as a few prostitutes walk down the street nearby. Joe VO. This city may look like shit. A few dope fiends shoot up right out in the open. Joe VO. Piled on top of shit. A gunshot rings out and police sirens blare as lights flash in the distance. Joe VO. Piled on top of some more shit. Across the street, a homeless woman with barely any teeth left smiles towards Joe. Joe VO. But at least it's honest. Gabby walks down a nearby street corner as a car stops by her. The driver rolls down his window as she leans towards him. Gabby, $30 for BJ's, honey. Joe puffs his cigarette and watches her get inside the passenger seat as no emotion on his face. So it's another just scene there to continue what I was going for. This really bleak existence. We're halfway through the script now, and we're really entrenched in the grime and the perversion that an inner city could have. I'm not trying to portray it all the same, but there's an element to this in any community, whether it's a rich community or poor community. There's going to be bad elements and good elements. Prostitution, should it be legal? That's a different conversation, but it's definitely not something you want to promote. Maybe it's the argument for legalizing it is so you don't throw people in jail or you don't spread diseases as much. You can regulate it like in Reno, but I don't know enough about it to really speak to it. The drug thing, yeah, you drive through Kensington. That's the one example since I've been through there in the past. You drive through Kensington near Philly, and you'll see people just like zombies. I guess today it's the fentanyl, but they're just shooting up on the street corners. There's YouTube videos, really sad, man, where people go around Kensington and just take videos of all these people, and it is like Walking Dead. They bend over once they inject the drugs. They're just like, it looks like something out of The Walking Dead. I'm not trying to make fun of it. It's sad, but that's what it looks like. What's the answer to that? How do you save a city like Kensington? Because I'm sure plenty of people in government try to figure that out. Do you legalize drugs and make people safer by letting them inject their drugs inside? Like some cities have done that in the past. I think Vancouver maybe, and maybe parts of European cities. Maybe because they don't want people shooting up on street corners. Or do you do the conservative approach and just lock all these people up and see what happens? I don't know. I think they tried that already. I don't have the answer, man. That's what I'm going for, though. The way that Kensington looks today where it's just like almost like a tent city with all drug addicts shooting up in the middle of the daytime. You could ride by and just notice it. And I'm sure a lot of other cities in America probably have that shit. But I don't have the answer. I'm just saying this is the scene I'm setting up. In the 80s, it probably was crack more than it is like methamphetamines today or whatever the hell stuff. I don't even know what fentanyl is. I have no idea what people are doing today to just zone out like that. I have no idea, man. But I think today it's even worse. You hear stories about the Narcan, how police and firefighters carry this Narcan on them because they have to deal with so many overdoses, and they might go through like dozens of these needles a day to save people. Like there's a story, but recently I heard, yeah, maybe it was in Los Angeles. I forget the city. And one of the police officers or firefighters, they probably saved like a dozen people in the course of a day or night because they just encounter so many people ODing. It's a crazy epidemic. So in the 80s, it was more relatable to crack cocaine, and I'm sure people still were doing heroin and stuff like that. That's always been around. But that's what I'm going for. I don't know what Atlantic City was like back then. I go by what I see on YouTube videos, and I guess gambling did start in the late 70s. The casinos came in, and there's an element of that. Gambling is a serious addiction. It could lead to, if you want to call it a gateway drug, it could almost be a gateway drug to like suicide. But I'm sure it leads to depression and people drinking themselves to death. But yeah, I always say, yeah. I don't know. It's very tricky situation to try to regulate stuff like that. 'Cause if 90 out of 100 people could gamble responsibly, the other 10 people out of 100 will end up becoming addicted and drug addicts and killing themselves. Do you punish the other 90 people because of those 10 people who don't know how to handle it? That's the question, really. It's the self-responsibility. People use that example of a lake with thin ice. And if you put a sign on there that says thin ice, but people still say, fuck it, I'm going to walk out on this thin ice, and they end up dying, like, whose fault is it? Like, they were warned. Like, you're warned about gambling. You know it's stupid. You know it's a lose-lose type of enterprise for most people. Some people don't care. They could just have money to blow, or they don't care. It's just fun for them. They could use it as an entertainment. So again, it goes back to that. Maybe it's a little bit different with drugs, because I don't think anyone can really handle opiates and heroin. It seems like it's a type of addiction that you can't escape from without getting into rehab. But cigarettes too. I don't know how I quit smoking. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And I'll talk more about that later, since this whole story so far has been nothing but smoking and prostitutes and cigarettes and cigarettes. All right, I'm going to read about 2 more pages, and then I'll come back later and read the rest. We're on another city street at nighttime as Lydia is walking by other prostitutes. She's adjusting her low-cut blouse and smoking a cigarette. Joe, VO. If I could go back, I'd still take the fall for her. A car stops in front of her, and Lydia walks over and leans her head inside the driver's side window. Joe, VO. She had priors, and that coked-up maniac might have killed us both that night if she hadn't gone all psycho on him. 2 snobby high school teens drink beer inside the car. Snobby high school teen 1. How much the fuck both of us, whore? Lydia walks away immediately. Snobby high school teen 2. Hey, where you going? We just want a little action. Lydia. Fuck off. I don't do kids. Snobby high school teen 1 exits the car and pins her against the side door, groping her up and down. Joe, VO. Jury might not have been so kind to a woman like her if it went to trial. Lydia screams as the high school kid gropes her more violently. Then she elbows him and pushes him away. He pushes her down to the pavement as she pulls a knife from her purse and stabs him in the leg just before he can attack again. Snobby high school teen 1. You fucking whore. She runs away down the street as he tends to his knife wound. Joe, VO. I later heard that most cops hated that asshole meathead anyway, and were secretly kind of glad he got killed. Alright, that's the end of that kind of a storyline. Like I said, yeah, he took the fall for her because she had prior, she was a known prostitute, and she would have done hard time, even though it was self-defense. You try to prove that in a court of law, where the only witness is Joe, but you try to prove that in a court of law, that the man was attacking her if it's a police officer. Yeah, good luck with that. A police officer versus a street prostitute. Well, whatever, yeah. It would be kind of a hard thing to get a light sentence, even if the rest of the police force hated this guy. Alright. We are now outside the video store again as Joe's stomping out his cigarette, and he's just staring lifeless towards the store behind him as he still does his VO. That's how you end up working at establishments like this. Most other places of employment won't even consider interviewing a cop killer. A cop car speeds by with its sirens blaring. Joe, VO. They don't want to know the details. That's where the devil lies, even if the truth is sitting back there with him. Joe walks away, then pauses and stares back towards the store. Joe, VO. I've seen plenty of revolting shit go down since I started working here, but watching that sleazy animal smash that glass pushed me to my breaking point. He unlocks the front door and walks inside. So he closed the shop, he's walking away. He's thinking, as this voiceover is also going on, and then he walks back in. Joe, VO. It had to burn. Alright, we're getting somewhere now. 30, I'll keep reading this. This is the fire montage, and this is when I'll end it as I get to the end of this. Page 30, this is the fire montage. Again, I go back to Donald Byrd. He's got a song called Beast of Burden. And hopefully if people listen to this, they can go check that out, because I really think that's an amazing album. A New Perspective by Donald Byrd. Alright, we're inside the video store. As Joe is dousing the room with gasoline, he's going through the comedy section, horror section, sci-fi section, and just putting gasoline all over this shit. We're in Joe's apartment. Lydia is shooting up in bed, feeling that blissful chemical release, and then she reaches for her pack of cigarettes. Alright, back into the video store in the back room. Joe's spreading gasoline on sex toys, on the porn VHS tapes, and he's the teddy bears in bondage. When I started my eBay store, I found these teddy bears in bondage at like a Goodwill. So that was like one of the first things I sold on my eBay store years and years ago. I was trying to make an eBay store like everybody else. Oh, I'll go to Goodwill and find a bunch of stupid shit and then resell it on eBay and make like $1 with the shipping and everything. I know people do it in a smart way. I just never got there to learn how to do it. my business brain isn't very mature. I don't know how to run a business. All right, now we're in Joe's apartment as Lydia is still in the bedroom and she accidentally drops the lit cigarette onto the bed. Then she passes out as a fire starts around her. Back at the video store, Joe's in the stripper room and he's putting gasoline all over the stripper booths, and he spreads more through the rest of the room with his mop. I thought that was a cool symbolic moment. He's got this huge canister of gasoline, and then he's mopping the gasoline like everywhere. Now back in Joe's apartment in the bedroom, Lydia is still passed out in bed as the flames are really encircling her now, like a ring of fire. Now Joe's outside the back of the building as he lights a match and tosses it through the back door into the stripper room, and then stares towards the flames as it spreads throughout the entire store. Very cathartic scene here. In the stripper room inside, the fire is quickly spreading as everything's catching fire. Now we're outside of Joe's apartment as a similar fire rages from his room as a few other residents run outside and gaze towards the flames coming out of the window. Back to the video store, a little bit later, Joe's lighting a cigarette as he watches the entire building burn from a safe distance away. So he wouldn't be right outside, you know. There's probably people calling the fire department at this point. So he's kind of far down the other street in an alley, just watching the building burn. While Deborah finds him and walks towards him from the shadows. She also lights a cigarette and stands by his side as they both share a smile and watch the building burn. Joe Vio. Out of the thousands of cigarettes I smoked in my short time on this planet, the one that night might have been the most pleasurable. Joe's apartment is the ending of this montage, as Joe is now strutting down the sidewalk, kind of feeling happy with himself for the first time since we've met him in this episode. He's got a smile on his face. Then he pauses in shock as he notices that his apartment building is on fire, coming from his room. Joe Vio. 2 raging infernos in the same night, both connected directly to me. Sometimes the universe just works like that. As flames are now raging through the window, Joe continues the VO. It's not like anyone really gave a shit about any of it. And that's the end of the fire montage. I was just thinking the police and firefighters would be like, all right, this guy Joe, his apartment burns up because his mom lit a cigarette in bed. Which is the truth, that's what happened. And then they'll be like, this guy Joe also works at this porn place, video store, and that burned up the same night. That's kind of weird. But again, this is the inner city. Would the police and firefighters really put that many resources into it? Not really. They just say, it's a coincidence. Who gives a shit? The video store burnt. It's not like it's a rich part of the city or some national monument. No one's really going to give a shit. And some crappy apartment building, again, no one's going to give a shit. So I think the story has a good arc so far. And I don't think there's any plot holes in a story that's it's supposed to be as absurd as possible. You really can't tell me, the police or the firefighters would never, whatever. It's a stupid story, man. This guy just happens to have his job burn up and his home burn up on the same night. That's just how the universe works. So that's how we end this fire montage. I'm going to stop here and read the next 30 pages when I come back. I think I still like this script a lot. I still think it's one of my favorites. It's a lot of voiceover, mostly this entire 30 pages, this experience has been mostly voiceover. So you really have to have a good voice actor who can handle a role like this. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's just Joe telling a story, and as we see these visuals, and that's just how it came out of my head. And I don't think it's overdoing it because of the flashbacks are in there, and somebody did say I had too much voiceover, and I'm at that like edge where I'm like, I don't know if that's true or not. Because the way I see it, it works, but you never know until you see it actually filmed. So is it too much voiceover? I don't know. I really don't know. I can't judge it because I'm kind of biased. So I'm just going to leave it there and see how it would if it does have to evolve, you would just have to write these scenes differently as more of a dialogue between the characters. But at this point, I'm not really concerned because the story's there. We open this first scene with Joe's face all bloodied and bruised. He's running the marathon in the Olympics with all these fans waving American flags and cheering him on. And the second part of this story will show that journey. So far, this first part is just showing who Joe is and how he got to this place in his life, where he's probably in his early 20s. He probably just got out of juvenile detention, and he has absolutely no chance of having any opportunity in his life because of his circumstances. Like, you can't really blame his mother, even though she's a whore, a prostitute, and she is a drug addict. Maybe she had a similar life too. She didn't have opportunities. She had to survive how she could survive. Who knows her backstory? But how do people end up on the street as drug addicts or anything else? I don't know. Everyone's different, man. But this is Joe's situation. He was a promising athlete in high school, and then circumstances he couldn't control. He had to take the fall for his mother and become known as a cop killer, even if it's self-defense, that he stabbed this guy because he was trying to save his mom. If that's the story they develop, even though Lydia's the one that killed him, that's probably the story that his lawyer would have given, and why he probably barely got any time in juvenile detention. Maybe he got 2 to 4 years in self-defense. I don't know what you would really get. Yeah, I'm not a legal mind, so I don't know. If it was proven to be self-defense, I don't even think you get any jail time. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to protect yourself in any type of a physical confrontation, right? Although there's Con Air. Nicolas Cage is like a trained Marine or Navy SEAL, whatever. And then in Con Air, he like beats the fuck out of the guy in a bar fight, and he kills him, and he still goes to jail for that. It's considered murder because he was a trained weapon. See, I don't know how that works. It's kind of like Rambo. Rambo came back from Vietnam, and he's like, fuck this, and just goes on a rampage. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know how self-defense works, but he took a plea deal, so it didn't even go to trial. He and Lydia decided, hey, take the plea deal. You'll get some years in juvenile detention. But worse than that is when he comes out of jail as a 20-year-old, whatever, and he's going to be known the rest of his life as a cop killer, because it's hard to get away from a reputation, even if it was in self-defense, even if this one cop was kind of a dick. No one liked him anyway. And he was obviously a corrupt police officer. But that's just the way this story went. And I think I developed Joe's character pretty well. He could be angry at this point of his life. Maybe he is a bit angry. He just set fire. He set fire to this den of perversion. He was probably getting more frustrated and frustrated, like that movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas. Falling Down's a pretty good movie. And I guess Joe's reached that boiling point where he couldn't take working in this den of perversion. He saw this gorilla banging on the glass and acting like a fucking idiot as he was trying to masturbate. And he's like, all right, I'm just done with this place. And he just sets it on fire. But I think it was just boiling up. Throughout this story so far, you would kind of show Joe with a very stoic frame of mind and his appearance, his demeanor. He doesn't really show emotion, even when Flip is punching him in the face and breaking his nose. He just stands there like Cool Hand Luke. Maybe he's like a bit of a modern Cool Hand Luke character. In a way, yeah. Because I think that's fair to call Cool Hand Luke. You can kind of portray him as in the 60s, he could be considered a modern day stoic philosopher with all the religious undertones of that movie. And that's reminding me, I never even finished it. I watched the first hour and then I forgot to finish that movie a couple of weeks ago. But when we come back, we're going to finish the last 30 pages and kind of go on a even more absurd look at how would Joe's character now become a marathon runner in the Olympics. That's how crazy of a story I was developing at this point. And this all came from me in 2019, 2020. COVID was happening and I was like freaking out. I had my mental breakdown and some dark shit. And to combat that, I started walking around the parking lot at my place of employment. Every day I would just walk around the parking lot. Maybe a month after that, when the weather got nicer, I started running, started jogging around the parking lot. And then it became really fucking addicting. Every day I would have to do something, run up hills or do sprints or just jog 30, 40 times around the parking lot. And it became a part of my daily ritual and something I needed. How did I turn that into this and into a guy who was smoking a cigarette as he runs his marathons? I think it's because when I started doing that, I was chewing on nicotine gum. I quit smoking early 2020 and it was tough. So I started chewing nicotine gum to kind of give me that nicotine rush. And as I was jogging, I think for the first week or so, I would jog while I was chewing the nicotine gum. So I never actually ran while I was smoking, but I was chewing nicotine gum, and that gave me the kind of influence that the way I designed Joe's character because of my experience like that. There was a time in my 20s, I guess, or maybe my early 30s, where I would go run for a jog, around the neighborhood or around the Cooper River. That was in high school, that was what we had to run around. It was almost 4 miles. So I would go there from time to time. One time I was setting a goal for myself. I'm going to run around the Cooper River 60 days in a row. And I think I did it. I came close at least, maybe 50 something. But even when I did that, I would finish my jog, go back to my car, drink some water, and then I'd smoke a cigarette. It was really odd. That was like, I was so addicted to cigarettes. Even after exercising, I would smoke a cigarette afterwards. It was like enjoyable, almost like a Pavlov thing. You run 4 miles, you get rewarded with a cigarette. So I don't know. I was weird back then. Maybe it's a bit bipolar, because that's probably the worst thing you could do after you exercise, or I don't know, eat like 2 Big Macs. Should totally just ruin what you just did. I don't know why I was like that. But yeah, for a good while, I would run about 4 miles, and then at the end, I'd be all out of breath and tired and sweaty, and I'd be like enjoying my cigarette while laying on top of my car. I remember moments like that. I don't know. I don't know if other people do that. People go to the gym and then they have like cigarette breaks after working out. I don't know if anyone really does that, but that's a long time ago. That's like in my 20s or early 30s when I did that. So these ideas sprung from moments like that in my life, and chewing the nicotine gum, which thankfully I was addicted to the nicotine gum. I got over the cigarettes, and then I'm addicted to the gum, and then I constantly like had to chew it all day. Even when I went to sleep, I like had to have it in my mouth, which was probably really stupid. So eventually I was like, I need to quit this gum now. Eventually I just quit that. I never tried the patches. And yeah, it was a tough few months once your body has to get off of nicotine and smoking. Once you're gone for a couple months, then you reach that level where, all right, I could actually do this. In those first few weeks, though, it's painful because you're so used to smoking. The way I am now, I think it's disgusting. I would never go back to it. Just thinking of it, it's like really, it just smells so bad. But I also see why people get addicted to it. It's a enjoyable way to relax. And doctors were giving it to patients in the 20s saying, here, you're having anxiety or heart murmurs, here, have a cigarette. Like doctors were actually prescribing cigarettes to people. In advertising, they would say 9 out of 10 doctors recommend whatever. So it's come a long way. Now I remember being in Canada, people were showing me the packs of cigarettes in Canada, and they put like pictures of black lungs on it. Like, this is what your lungs are going to look like if you keep smoking. And people do it anyway. I'll go back to the first episode of Mad Men was about that. Reader's Digest had an article in the 60s saying that cigarettes will lead to cancer and all these health issues, heart failure, blood disease, whatever the fuck else. And Mad Men has Lucky Strike cigarettes as their main client. And they're like, how are we going to survive? We have our lobbyists in Congress buying off the politicians, but now people are aware of this, and advertising agencies in the 60s were still advertising smoking. Like, it was very common for people to smoke in the 50s, 60s, and I guess 70s. Really through the 80s. Maybe today things are really going the opposite direction, but back in the 50s and 60s, like, everyone smoked. So yeah, it was a good episode. They're going through advertising strategies, and somebody from their psychology department was like, well, the reason people smoke is because they secretly have a lust for death, not a lust for life, but they have a morbidity and a obsession with death. And there's some truth to that. I think there is a relevance to that, where people, even Ozzy Osbourne wrote the Suicide Solution, which I found out yesterday. He wrote that song about how alcoholism is a slow way to kill yourself. It might take decades, but you'll eventually kill your liver and die. So alcoholism is a form of suicide if you drink to that level. And cigarettes could be could be related to that as well. But some people smoke all their lives and they don't ever have anything. I don't know what it is. Everyone kind of handles all these things differently. So, yeah, it's a big theme of this. I said every scene, I purposefully wanted to put cigarettes in every single scene so far. And this is almost like even though there's so much smoking, it is like an anti-smoking type of an experience by the end, I think at least. But I'm not really trying to be preachy. That's not the reason or the motivation for writing a story like this. I don't care if people smoke. Just when I used to smoke, I think my biggest regret is just that maybe I did it around people. I should have moved farther away so people didn't have to. That's why I put that in there about the first unwritten rule of smoking, the second unwritten rule of smoking. Don't blow smoke in people's faces or whatever. Because that was a thing. I think that's the main reason that public opinion shifted. Imagine being on an airplane today, or in a movie theater, or in a taxi, wherever, in an Uber. Like, I don't think anyone's really going to smoke in public spaces. But I have no problem. If people want to smoke, I'm not going to judge those people. I want to preach like the characters I wrote. I'm not going to try to preach to people. Probably because I used to be a smoker. So I know what it's like and the addiction of it. But yeah, because people who do smoke, it's not like they don't know what they're doing. They either don't give a shit or they just been doing it for so long that it's not going to cause them stress. They're not going to think about the consequences as they get into their older years. That's why I put that line in one of the scenes I wrote. Some people just have different opinions on life and death. When Joe and Deborah are smoking a cigarette together in the strip club, and then he throws the matches on the ground, lights a match and throws it, lights a match and throws it. So he was probably considering that back then, that he wanted to burn the place down. It was in the back of his head. Like, this place is such a den of perversion and evil. I just want to burn this whole fucking place down. So there are moments in there inspired by all these things I'm talking about. But we're going to get more comical now as we get into the next 30 pages. From this story so far, you think it's kind of a really morbid tale of inner city life and surviving on the streets, and which I have no knowledge of. My only knowledge of these things come from other movies I've seen and documentaries and books I've read. And that's how I never want to come off as fake or plastic or that imposter syndrome type of thing, but when you want to create a world like this, you have to use some artistic liberties. I don't know what it's like to live in the inner city. I grew up in the suburbs. I went to Catholic school. So it's not based on, none of these characters are based on my life. I just had to come up with an interesting, absurd storyline for Lydia, for Joe, and well, later on we'll meet some other characters. And I said, yeah, I never gave Joe a race. I never said he's a white dude or a black dude, because this story could work in either case. It has nothing to do with inner city or inner city politics or stuff like that. It could really be open to any kind of actor if this story connects to somebody. When I first started writing scripts, I would do that. I'd be like, Joe is a white dude and he looks like this. And then I was like, I don't want to make it so narrow. So I very rarely put the person's race. I just say he's a man or woman and leave it there. It could be anybody. It's open to anyone. Elegant Eccentrics, there's a character named Kim, which is usually an Asian name, and a character named Yish, which I don't know if that's like a Jewish thing. Yish, it sounds like a Jewish name, but I don't know. I just like the names. But that shit could always change later, depending on who, to make it more realistic. I don't picture Kim in Elegant Eccentrics as an Asian dude, but he could be. So I do keep that in mind. If I would say Joe is a white guy or a black guy, then that kind of limits the role to different actors when want to go out for it. But depending on who would buy the script, I guess then they would decide all those details. Or really, I guess to me, if I was casting this, once I see an actor that fits this mode and has the voice that I'm looking for, then I don't care what color they are. That doesn't really matter to this story. What does etymology mean? Yeah, Yish is a rare, affectionate nickname of Hebrew origin names. Yeshai, which is Jesse, or Yeshaya. I just think that's a cool name, Yish. Nice and simple name. Etymological associations is Yeshai, Jesse. So I do put some thought into the names and shit. Sometimes I don't at all, like in this case. But when we come back, I'll read these last 30 pages and you'll see what I'm talking about. I don't want to say this story is dark, but because of the setting and the time period, the inner city in the 80s, the war on drugs, it was probably a lot like the ICE shit, where ICE can just come into any community and do whatever the fuck they want. The war on drugs, I think it was similar. People, just innocent bystanders. The war on drugs probably had some good intentions, even though I talked about it before. It was probably like really racist shit. And yeah, nobody wants to have their family or community riddled with crack cocaine or regular cocaine or heroin or any of these hard drugs. You don't want to go outside, walk your kids down the sidewalk and see all these drug addicts looking like zombies. So yeah, I'm not trying to promote it. The war on drugs, some people probably had good intentions. They want to clean up their communities and save people's lives, because these people will die eventually. If you're a drug addict, especially heroin and stuff like that, you don't have a very high life expectancy. It's just the way it is. But again, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm just going by the type of shit that I've seen on TV and other people telling stories about it. But I don't have experiences in my own life, anything to do with anything in this story. There's nothing, there's like no hint of a personal connection at all. I just had to make this story as absurd as possible, starting from a chain smoking marathon runner. How did he get there? How did his life get to that point? So, of course, this has nothing to do with my own life. I did run track in high school for like 1 year. but it wasn't marathons. It was just sprinting and stuff like that. And it was enjoyable. I thought it was a really good experience, good coaching, and really good track program. And it was fun. It's really anxious because I always played team sports. I never was an individual athlete like track and field. But when you're track and field doing a 400 or a 200 a relay race is kind of a team sport. But yeah, you get this added surge of adrenaline because it's just you. It's just you against other individuals running as fast as you can. It was a good rush, man. The first time I had a race was indoor track, like a 55 meter, and I was so nervous that I just got disqualified. I ran out of my lane like within the first 5 seconds because I was so fucking like full of this adrenaline. I wanted to win so badly, and I just went into the next lane and got disqualified. So I wasn't that good. I was very average, I would say, but I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and I would recommend track to anybody if you can get into that type of an experience. I only did it for 1 year, so I'm not the right person to talk about it. I did 200, 100, and 400, but it was a long road to get there. I just never knew if I could do it until I actually tried it. I couldn't do any jumping events. Like, I couldn't do the pole vault or the jumping stuff. I just didn't have the leg strength to do that shit, or to do it good enough to be worthy of doing it. But yeah, it was a good experience. The long distance shit's different though. In 2020, when I was going through all these changes and shit, and I was trying to become healthier, every Saturday I would walk 20 miles. Every Saturday I'd like drive to some park and walk 20 miles to just feel more confident in myself. It's really the main motivation. After you have some mental breakdown shit, you just want to go forward into a different identity and leave that shit behind. Kind of worked, but then I kind of gave up on it after maybe 6-7 months of doing it. Once the cold weather came in, I kind of just gave up and never went back. I started getting into, I heard of David Goggins on Joe Rogan, and he's talking about his crazy life. And there's a bit of him in this character, David Goggins. If you don't know his story, go check him out. I believe he had a similar beginning to his life. He was overweight and living in this like bug infested apartment with his mother and maybe an abusive stepfather or someone. Don't quote me on this. It's been a while since I heard his story. But he wrote a couple books now about kind of like motivational speaking. And he became an ultra marathoner once he finally started changing his life when he was younger. He became like the first African American Navy SEAL, maybe. After kind of, maybe it took him a couple tries to become that. But again, don't quote me on any of this. Just go look up David Goggins. He's got 2 books, and I did kind of read one of them. Maybe not fully, but his Joe Rogan podcast was one of the best I've seen. And there's probably a bit of him in this story because he is kind of a stoic dude. Maybe he's more kind of aggressive personality. People say, yeah, even like ultra marathoners will be like, who can run 200 miles in a couple days or whatever, nonstop. These ultra marathoners are just insane. They're like aliens. I don't know how they do this shit. But they'll talk about David Goggins like, man, that dude's even crazier. The way he works out and shit is just insane. So there's a bit of his character in Joe because it was in my head when I was writing this. Like for me, walking 20 miles, it would take me 5, 6 hours, and I was dead tired by the end. But these ultra marathon people, they're going like 200 miles in a weekend, nonstop, no sleep, barely eating anything. I never knew that even existed. There's this one female ultra marathoner. I believe she was on Joe Rogan too. And just the experience that I got living through these people and hearing their stories was very inspirational in my own life, and also as I was writing this. Let me see if I can find her name, because I don't remember. Female ultra marathon runner. I don't even remember, because this is like a good 5 years ago. But I think she was on Joe Rogan, so that's how I'll search for it. Courtney Dauwalter, yeah, D-A-U Walter. She's a premier American ultramarathon runner. She was on Joe Rogan in 2017, where she won the Moab 240. She ran 240 miles in under 58 hours. So these people are insane. She frequently beats male competitors and has dominated races like the Western States 100. So yeah, go check her out too. Maybe this will get me back into kind of doing stuff like this again, because I haven't done it through the winter time really. When you listen to people like this, you feel like such a fucking pussy. Whether it's David Goggins or somebody like this woman, Courtney Dauwalter, if I'm saying her name right. You listen to them and how they deal with crazy distance running, 240 miles in 60 hours. I don't think she sleeps at all. Just try and staying awake for 60 hours. It's not easy to do that. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. She actually discussed hallucinating during her longer races. I guess that's kind of like the runner's high. But yeah, go listen to her. Joe Rogan episode number 1027 from 2017. And the David Goggins one, it's probably from around that time. He might have been on a couple times. But it's hard not to get inspired by his story and some of the shit that the downside is that he's got some really bad injuries. I don't know if that's really due to how hard he pushes himself. David Goggins has been on Joe Rogan 3 times, or more than that. Number 1080, number 1212, and 1906. So the one I watched, is the one where he talks about being over 300 pounds and then his journey to become a Navy SEAL. And it's pretty good. Yeah, that was his big thing, building calluses on the brain. And that's why that's a good memory boost for myself. That he makes it more about your mental foundation. And in the first scenes, I was writing that voiceover as Joe's running his marathon. And he's saying, if you can't deal with your own bullshit, then you probably can't run a marathon, because you're going to be alone with your thoughts for 2 hours as you run, whatever it is, 26 miles. If you can't deal with your own bullshit, let me read that again. If you can't stomach your own bullshit and be happy in your own skin, then you're never going to be able to make it through a marathon. So it's more mental than physical almost. Maybe it's even more mental. Of course, you have to train your body your lungs, your legs, everything, your breathing. You have to train your body to run 26 miles. But if you can't convince your feeble monkey brain that your body isn't really experiencing any of that pain in the first place, then you probably can't run a marathon. For about 2 hours, I can completely detach my spirit from my physical nature, while most sane people tend to listen when their legs tell them to fucking stop with the running already. I just let them do their job and shut off all further communication between mind and body. So that's all about the David Goggin philosophy. So yeah, I probably don't give him enough credit. Listening to his philosophy on stuff like this, the power of the mind to overcome things you think you can't overcome. I was just saying, like, most heroin addicts probably don't see a path where they can get clean because they've convinced themselves that this is my life now. I wake up and do whatever and I take heroin. I can't function without heroin. They probably convince themselves, and their mental clarity isn't there to show them a way out of that. How do you show these drug addicts a way out? That's kind of similar to this. Right now, I don't even know if I could run a mile or 2 miles. If I trained for the next 6 months every day, could I run a marathon? The first voice that comes out of my head is, fuck no. You're 44. You think you can run a marathon now, motherfucker? And that's the first thought would probably be similar with most people. But if I really did it, and as I'm doing it, I'm actually thinking to myself, you stupid fuck, you could do this. Why did you think you couldn't do this, you fucking idiot? That's the David Goggins that, even though it's not fresh in my head, that's kind of what I remember from his kind of philosophy on things. And yeah, it's hard not to get inspired by people like that seem like they're superhuman. But he was just like anybody else. He was 300 pounds, and you look at him now, and he's got like a sculpted body, and he can run 200 miles with bad knees and other problems. Yeah, it's a pretty crazy story. Go check him out if you just need a kick in the ass today. Whether you're an athlete or an artist or anybody, I think him and Steven Pressfield, which both came from Joe Rogan podcast. So yeah, I said in the post I originally shared on Substack, I was like, I got to thank Joe Rogan too. He led me to David Goggins. He led me to Steven Pressfield. And even though those books and those conversations aren't fresh in my head, they had an influence on me during this time period when all I did was wake up and write. And I was able to write 15 screenplays in maybe 2 years, and everything else I was doing. And at that point, a very hermit-like existence, but it was highly productive. And I gained a new efficiency in my work ethic to put the bullshit where the bullshit deserves to be, which is not in your head, whether it's your own or from somebody else. I think the beauty of the marathon is that it's just you. It's you against yourself as you're struggling to run 26 miles. I shouldn't be speaking on this because I've never done it, but I can just imagine it seems like a crazy thing to accomplish. But it's really you against yourself. It's you against your mental limitations and your physical limitations. To say, fuck it, I'm just going to do this. And to get to that point, I'm sure it's not easy. Like walking 20 miles was hard for me to do. To train myself to have the patience to do that. It took about 5-6 hours every time. And I would run like the first 5 miles, but then I would just walk the rest. And I never really developed a good routine to get to a point like that where I could run 20 miles without stopping. That's something very foreign to me in terms of long distance running. It was just never attractive to me. But is it really attractive to anybody? The first day where you start that journey, I'm preparing for a marathon. Day one, you wake up. This is my first day of marathon training. Maybe you run a mile or 2 miles if you're lucky. Before your knees are like, fuck. Before your ankles are like, fuck. And then maybe by day 10, you get to 4 or 5 miles. And then maybe day 30, you get to 10 miles. I don't know. I really don't know. I would have to do more research because I don't think I could run more than a couple miles right now. And I'd be forcing myself. So, yeah, it's something to think about. Hopefully, maybe this story will light a fire in my ass that I'll be able to start working out again, to get motivated to do that every day. But again, I'm trying to move across the country. So it's like I have different priorities right now, trying to see how my life's going to go for the next 20, 30 years. I'm trying to get security in my life like that. And that's kind of holding me back from doing other stuff I want to do. Because if you don't have that, by the time you're my age, it's difficult to really to try other things or get back to working out or other things I want to do. Because number one, you have to get security in your life. And well, ideally, I would have gotten that from the writing I've done and all these stories I've written and all the music side that I'm trying to promote and get out there as a songwriter, as a screenwriter, just as an artist in general. That's where ideally the stability would come from. If somebody thought this was a great indie idea for an indie film with very little production cost, half this movie is just a dude smoking a cigarette running in a marathon. As we get to the last 30 pages, you're going to see that this is not a very difficult production. This is a typical indie movie where you can even have unknown artists or unknown actors and become the indie darling of all those film festivals. Very limited production for a story like this. Very limited characters. The casting is very limited. It's Joe, it's his mother, it's the track coach, and that's about it. There's some other side characters as we go through this journey, but it's very limited. This would be maybe the most low-cost script I've done. Really, you would just need to, the setting, make sure it looks like 1980s. Make sure you get extras to be the marathon, cheering him on like a real Olympic marathon. And how do you show that? I have a scene at the end where the real Olympic marathon in Los Angeles in 1984, it went into the Coliseum, wherever, that big stadium. And how do you shoot that? Do you have to use CGI for that? I don't know. So maybe there's some tougher, there's some tougher scenes like that would require some research. I don't even know if that stadium's there anymore. I think so. I think that's where USC plays, but I don't know that for a fact. Who plays at the Coliseum? That would make sense, right? The USC Trojans. Who plays at the LA Coliseum? It's got to be some college team, if it's even still there, right? Yeah, USC Trojans. have played there since 1923. Jesus. Stadium is now known as United Airlines Field, and it hosts USC football games. It's still there. That's pretty cool. It's been there since 1923. 2028 Olympic Impact. That's cool. The stadium will host the Summer Olympics, track and field, in 2028. That's pretty interesting. The venue is the only one to host two Olympiads in 1932, 1984, which is in this story, and is set to host the third in 2028. There you go. We have to make this movie happen now so we could get some up-and-comer marathon runner to begin smoking cigarettes and become the real-life Smoking Joe. There's the Olympics in Los Angeles in 2028. We have 2 years to make this movie. Come on, people. Because it's not going to be me. I'm not going to be the one chain smoking, participating in the marathon in 2 years from now. I'm not going to start smoking again or running a marathon. I really doubt any of those two things are in my future. So that's, well, you talk about marketing. The Olympics are about to come to Los Angeles in 2 years. My story that I just wrote, well, I wrote 4 years ago, is about the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. That's a perfect time to release this movie right now, because everyone's going to be thinking of the 2028 Olympics and the marathon there. There's probably people training for that as I speak right now, from all over the world. There you go. I didn't even know America was hosting the Olympics. I don't really keep up to date with this shit. So I don't think you could have a better time to release a movie like this. So come on, who wants to work on this project? It's the perfect time where people are going to get ready for the Olympics in 2 years in the same exact place where this would get filmed, hopefully, or you would have to, if you're not given permission to make this movie in Los Angeles, you kind of have to improvise at that point and use other buildings and pretend it's Los Angeles. Because I don't know how easily they would give you a permit to film a movie. Would you be able to film this movie in the streets of LA? Or you would have to find a different city and just pretend it's LA? Because usually it's too expensive to film around there. Yeah, film it wherever, it doesn't fucking matter. The only thing that would have to be historically accurate is the ending, because I do have a scene inside the stadium during the Olympic marathon. The ending of that marathon goes into the Coliseum. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I wonder if the 2020, because I'm sure they have this planned out already, will the 2028 Olympic marathon be the same as 1984? Be the same as... All right, let's see if this gives me any information. Yeah, the first thing that came up is the 2028 Olympic Trial Marathon could feature the deepest American field in history. I don't care about that. So LA always has the Olympics. Los Angeles has had the Olympics in 1984 and 1932, and now they're getting it again. No other American cities can fucking get the Olympics, man. What about, like, I don't know, Newark, New Jersey? that's just as beautiful as fucking Los Angeles. So there is a marathon. Los Angeles will host the official starting locations for the marathon, but I don't know if it's going to go through the Coliseum again. All right, I'm talking for too long. This is the last thing I'm going to look up. Where will the 2028 Olympic marathon finish? Let's see if they figured that out yet. Like, where will the finish line be? Because in 1984, it was inside the Coliseum, I believe. All right, the 2028 Olympic Marathon will start at Venice Beach, but the official finish line has not been announced. All right, so we don't know yet. I'm sure it's going to go through. If they want to pay tribute to 1984, I guess it would. Yeah, while not confirmed for the marathon, the LA Memorial Coliseum serves as the primary athletics venue for the 2028 games. So yeah, it could be. This is pretty interesting. I'm just finding this out right now. Like, there's no better marketing campaign as if you could make this movie happen right now and then market it during the Olympics. It's such a perfect opportunity. Yeah, it even makes me more excited to put a movie like this together. And it's really not a huge production. You could film this pretty quickly. Really, the most important thing is finding the right actor with the right voice, and then you're on your way. But all right, I'm talking too long. The next 30 pages, I'll come back in a couple hours and read them. It's going to be a much more fun experience than we've had so far as we follow Joe and his battle, his journey to become the best marathon runner of all time. And we'll see how the story ends. I vaguely remember at this point. But yeah, I do remember how I ended this. There were a couple ways I could have ended a story like this, and I think I came out with the right conclusion. But you'll be the judge of that. That's all for now. Hopefully you get a glimpse of why I love this story so much, why there's so much potential for a young, upcoming actor to be the leading role here. And the comedy genius, it's almost like Happy Gilmore. Happy Gilmore was a comedy for the sake of a stupid comedy. A hockey player becomes a golf player. But there's probably some kind of subconscious connection, because I grew up with that. Billy Madison, Nudie Magazine Day. I grew up with Happy Gilmore. I didn't see the part two. I never watched it, but there has to be some kind of a relevance, since that movie was a big part of my childhood, and the tone and the atmosphere is way different in my script. It's nothing to do with like that Adam Sandler very unique type of comedy experience, Mista. But yeah, mine's a little bit more dark and introspective. I don't think there's any flashback scenes too greatly in Adam Sandler comedies like that. But the story's similar in a way. It is the most absurd story you could think of as a hockey goon that becomes the best golfer on the Pro Tour. And all the crazy, absurd shit within that story. So it's not that far off, but it's just the tone and the type of atmosphere that you create. So hopefully you see what I'm going for. I think it's pretty obvious what I'm going for. I just need other people to kind of collaborate and bring this to life.